Hi and Assalamualaikum to our Madam NURUL Fahana binti Harun. My name is NORALYA binti Muhammad Nur HAIZEE. My matric number is 2019-213574. Today, my group members and I will be presenting about the de-inflation in Japan. So, without further ado, let's proceed our presentation with the introduction of this topic. So, inflation is defined as persistent and sustained increase in the aggregate or average price level of goods and services in the economy. In simple words, inflation can be defined as the decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time, and there is an increase in the cost of living. So, the higher the inflation, the lower the value of the money. Next is the degree of inflation. So the first degree of inflation is creeping. When creeping occurs, the price is increased gradually but continue to increase over time. This degree of inflation, also known as mildest inflation, which is the lowest inflation. At this time, the price is gently rising. Next is walking. So the price increase between 3% and 10% per year. It also known as trotting inflation, which is more than creeping. Next is running inflation, which is the price increase between 10 to 20% in a year. At this time, the price is rapidly increased. Next is galloping. The price increase between 20% up to 1000% per year. This degree of inflation also known as jumping inflation. Next is hyperinflation. At this time, the price surged more than 50% or at alarming high rates above 1000%. At this time, the value of money reduced to almost zero and people start to trading gold and silver and using barter system. Last is stagflation, which is the economy showed the high unemployment stagnant of the economic growth and the highest inflation. This inflation had occurred in the US and UK in 1970s until early 1980s. So now let's take a look about the real problem in Japan. So in Japan, there is no problem of higher inflation rate because Japan is one of the countries that have the lowest rate of inflation in the world. So this gives pressure to BOJ, which is Bank of Japan, because it will be hard for them to introduce new economic stimulus to the citizen because to achieve the price target 2%. So the real problem happened in Japan is actually deflation. Deflation is a fall of overall level of prices in an economy and an increase in purchasing power. So this situation is bad for them because it will reduce the demand from the consumer. Until here my presentation, I will pass my presentation to the next presenter that will explain more about the inflation in Japan. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is SHAHRIL binti Muhammad Sharil, and today I am going to present about the causes and effects of deflation in Japan. As we all know, Japan is a country that does not experience any inflation because they are experiencing deflation. Japan has suffered from deflation for more than 20 years, and this is because Plaza Accord doubled the value of the dollar's exchange rate against the yen between 1985 and 1987, creating a tremendous speculative asset price bubbles. The bubble was caused by the excessive lending quota imposed on banks by the Bank of Japan, the Central Bank of Japan, using a policy mechanism called window guidance. Japanese banks raised their interbank lending rates significantly at the end of 1989. Financial institutions were bailed out through the ability to postpone government inflows, central bank lending and affordable credit, recognition of losses and eventually convert to zombie banks. Many Japanese companies have huge debts, making it very difficult to get credit. And many of these companies have borrowed too much to do much more than survive as a bailout. Japanese banks lend more while reducing their interest in borrower quality than other banks. And this is bad for the country as it leads to lower economic growth. There are four effects of deflation in Japan. Firstly, it increases the real value of debt, which means reducing the purchasing power of businesses and consumers. Secondly, discouraging consumer spending. When prices drop, this often encourages people to postpone their purchases because they will be cheaper in the future. Thirdly, lead to unnecessary tightening of monetary policy, which means problematic for Eurozone countries that cannot resort to any other monetary policy. And lastly is real wage unemployment. In times of deflation, real wages rise can lead to real wage unemployment. In particular, workers are protesting against nominal wage cuts, especially if you are at home with raising salaries. Nobody really likes lower wages. Unemployment which will be linked is involuntary unemployment. Involuntary unemployment includes workers who have been laid off due to economic crisis, industrial decline, company bankruptcy, or organizational reorganization. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is NORALYA binti NORHELMI and I will continue for the data analysis. The statistic shows Japan's inflation rate from 2000 to 2020. Japan ranks second after the United States and China in terms of gross domestic product or known as GDP, making it the world's third largest economy. With the exception of a few notable growth decline from time to time, Japan's GDP has remained stable for the previous decade, mainly in the service industry. The industrial sector contributes around 30% of Japan's GDP, whereas agriculture contributes only 1.3%. This is reflected in the distribution of the economic sectors of Japan's employment, where a majority of Japanese employees were in the service sector. As shown in the graph, Japan's inflation rate is among the lowest in the world. Over the years, the ratio of the country's national debt to GDP has reached spectacular heights, while the ratio of Japan's budget balance to GDP has been running at a deficit of around 10% of GDP for several years. In terms of trade, Japan is one of the world's leading exporters and importers. China and the United States are Japan's primary export and import partners. The country mostly exports electronics, transportation equipment, and vehicles, while fossil fuels, foods, and textiles are the main import items. However, this does not indicate that Japan's economy will rebound anytime soon, and the country's trade balance has also shown a rise in deficit over the past few years. Next slide is about effect of COVID-19 issue on inflation. Although the Japanese economy is still in a bad situation affected by the new coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, it has shown a recovery trend. The foreign economies have mostly recovered, but there has been variance between countries and regions. Export and industrial production continue to rise in such circumstances. Furthermore, company earnings and business sentiment have generally improved. Corporate fixed investment has rebounded even though there has been some downturn in some areas. Because of the effect of COVID-19, employment and income conditions are still weak. Private consumption has slowed due to increased downward pressure on the consumption of services such as catering and accommodation. Housing investment fell slightly while public investment continued to rise slowly. Overall, financial situation have been accommodating, although there have been some weakness in the company's financial positions. In terms of price, the year-on-year rate of change in core consumer price, excluding fresh food, has been somewhat negative, mostly due to COVID-19 and the recent drop in crude oil price. In the meantime, inflation expectations are almost unchanged.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day, madam. I'm HANI and I'm going to present my part for the measures to take to overcome the inflation problem in Japan. As it has been mentioned earlier, Japan is currently experiencing low rate of inflation, therefore leads to the problem of deflation. Economists Fumio Hayashi and Edward Prescott proposed the idea that Japan's low investment activity should be viewed in terms of low levels of planned capital expenditure rather than credit limitations that prevent companies from financing projects with positive net present value. Jennifer Amick said in her observation of Japan's steady route to economic success and an abrupt reverse that Japanese specialists were well aware of the likely causes of the country's economic collapse. Instead, it is unavoidable for the officials to adopt measures that will first inflict short-term harm to the Japanese people and government in order to return Japan's economy to a path of economic prosperity. In 1991, Japan took the first action by attempting economic stimulus, that is, by running a fiscal deficit. This attempt had not only shown bad effects on the Japanese economy but also caused a huge debt burden contributed to the Japanese government. In 2013, it was declared that Japan is at the highest level of any other country on earth in terms of debt, which is expressed in terms of GDP of 240%. Shinzo Abe, Japanese former Prime Minister, had proposed a reform program named Abenomics on the year 2012. There are three main points of reform which are called Abe's three arrows, which serves its purpose to address chronically low inflation, decreasing worker productivity relative to other developed nations, and demographic issues raised by an aging population. The economy recovered dramatically for a while and public debt has stabilized for the first time in years, yet the fundamentals of interest rates and inflation remain largely unchanged, leaving little room for aggression in the event of a downturn like the COVID-19 disaster. Lessons that can be taken from Japan's action in the short term: monetary or fiscal measures may boost consumption, but unless productivity growth accelerates, there is a valid concern that such policies will malicious Japan from a low growth, low inflation economy to a low growth, high inflation economy. So that's it. That is all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nuriana binti Muhammad SHAHLIZAN with matching number 2019210322. Okay, today I will be concluding our report on inflation in Japan. Japan has been struggling to inflate their economy for almost 2 decades. Many approaches, including monetary policy and fiscal policy, are already being implemented to overcome the problem of low inflation rate by the Japan government, as it has been explained in the previous part of the report. However, these approaches are only effective on the short run, and their economy has yet to show any improvement in that particular problem. In order to achieve a positive output gap, a growth strategy plays an important role. So, in my opinion, if the Japan government proceed a bold plan of deregulation, the base money supplied by the Bank of Japan, which is BOJ, would be more effective, as anti-competitive laws and regulation is one of the obstacles faced by the Japan. And other than that, the growth in Japan economy is also being held back by the relatively high taxes, and it is proven to be one of the hindrances for the economic program to achieve its goal, which is to increase demand and achieve inflation. So, if the Japan's government cannot get the better of these obstacles, it might be hard for them to avoid future economic marginalization. Okay, that's all for our report on inflation in Japan. Thank you.